Hello, everyone. You thought you were watching a comedy about teenage rebellion, but you were actually witnessing a tragedy in real time. Stephen Hyde wasn't the cool anti-hero. He was Danny Masterson, a predator hiding behind a laugh track. Lori Foreman wasn't just a messy character. She was Lisa Robin Kelly, dying a slow, lonely death while the cameras rolled. And the beloved golden couple, Ashton and Mila, they weren't heroes. They were enablers protecting a monster. The basement was never a sanctuary. It was a crime scene. Welcome to the dark, untold reality of That 70s Show curse. For 2 decades, a monster hid in plain sight. His camouflage was the very character that made him a star. When That 70s Show premiered on August 23, 1998, it was entering a television landscape dominated by Friends and Seinfeld. It needed an edge. It found that edge in the character of Stephen Hyde. Played by Danny Masterson, Hyde was the anti-hero of the group. With his aviator sunglasses, his unruly afro, and his conspiracy-laden worldview, Hyde was the cynic who saw through the lies of the government and the hypocrisy of the system. He was the protector of the group, the guy who would punch a bully to save his friends, the guy who lived by an unwavering code of loyalty. Danny Masterson did not just play Stephen Hyde to the public and his castmates. He was Stephen Hyde. He was older than most of the other cast members. He was more experienced. He possessed a natural devil-may-care charisma that made him the de facto leader of the show's social life. While Topher Grace was introverted and businesslike, Masterson was the party king. He was DJ Mom Jeans, the guy who controlled the music, the clubs, and the vibe. He was the one you wanted to impress. But the character of the anti-establishment rebel was a brilliant fabrication. In reality, Danny Masterson was a devout, high-ranking lieutenant in one of the most authoritarian and controlling organizations on earth, the Church of Scientology. Masterson was a second-generation Scientologist. He was not a casual believer. He was born into the structure, raised in its ideology, and indoctrinated in its methods. In the worldview of Scientology established by science fiction writer L. Ron Hubbard, the world is divided into 2 distinct groups: Scientologists who possess the truth and are on the path to becoming clear, and wogs, a derogatory term for non-believers who are viewed as unenlightened, lesser beings. Within this framework, Masterson was raised with a sense of innate superiority. He was taught that his survival and the survival of his church were the only things that mattered. He was taught that traditional laws and morals were mechanisms of the wog world, designed to suppress the superior capabilities of the Thetan. This theological narcissism, combined with the explosive fame and wealth of a hit sitcom, created a dangerous psychological cocktail. Masterson believed he was untouchable not just because he was famous, but because he was spiritually elite. By the early 2000s, Masterson's home in the Hollywood Hills had become the epicenter of young Hollywood's social scene. It was a fortress of luxury, a bachelor pad where the alcohol flowed freely, the music never stopped, and beautiful women were always in attendance. It was here, behind the gates of his private sanctuary, that Stephen Hyde took off his sunglasses and the predator emerged. The timeline of Danny Masterson's crimes aligns perfectly with the peak popularity of That 70s Show. While millions of families were gathering around their televisions to watch the gang hang out in the basement, Masterson was turning his own home into a trap. The victims were not random strangers plucked from a nightclub. This is a crucial detail that allowed the crimes to go unpunished for so long. The victims were fellow Scientologists. They were women who moved in the same social circles, women who trusted the church, and women who had been conditioned to respect the hierarchy of the organization. Masterson, being a celebrity member, sat near the top of that hierarchy. In 2001, Masterson was dating a young woman known in court records as Christina B. She was a Scientologist, and by all accounts, she was enamored with Masterson's status and charm. But the relationship was defined by Masterson's need for total control. According to harrowing court testimony that would not be heard by a jury for 22 years, the night of the assault began with a disturbance in the middle of the night. Christina B. woke up to find Masterson dragging her out of bed. The cool guy from TV was gone. In his place was a man fueled by entitlement and rage. Masterson forced himself on her. When she resisted, when she said no, when she tried to fight back against the man the world saw as a protector, he escalated the violence. Testimony revealed that Masterson struck her in the face. But the physical blows were not the end of the terror. Then, Masterson reached into his nightstand and pulled out a handgun. He kept it there for protection, but in that moment, it became an instrument of subjugation. He did not need to fire it. The mere presence of the weapon, the cold steel introduced into an act of sexual violence, shattered Christina B.'s will to resist. He raped her while she lay terrified, staring at the gun, realizing that her life was entirely in the hands of a man who viewed her as nothing more than an object to be used. 2 years later, in 2003, the pattern repeated with a woman known as Jen B. Like Christina, Jen was a part of the Scientology circle. She had been invited to Masterson's Hollymont drive home, the infamous party house. Masterson handed her a drink. This simple gesture, a staple of hospitality, was the weapon. Jen B. testified that shortly after consuming the beverage, her motor functions began to fail. She felt heavy, disoriented, and unable to control her limbs. It was not the feeling of simple intoxication, it was the chemical paralysis of a date rape drug. She remembered Masterson guiding her into his jacuzzi. She remembered the water, and then the darkness took over. When she regained flashes of consciousness, she was in Masterson's bed. He was on top of her. She was being raped. The horror of the situation pierced through the chemical fog. She tried to scream, tried to push him off, tried to assert her humanity. Masterson's response was not to stop. It was to silence her. He placed his hands around her throat and squeezed. He choked her until the oxygen was cut off from her brain, forcing her back into unconsciousness. He suffocated her resistance until she was limp, compliant, and silent. These were not bad dates. These were not misunderstandings. These were violent, predatory acts committed by a serial rapist who used his home as a dungeon and his fame as a lure. And the most terrifying part? He did it with the absolute confidence that he would never be caught. In the WOG world, the real world, if a woman is raped, she is encouraged to go to the police, to a hospital, to a friend. But in the world of Danny Masterson, these avenues of escape were blocked by a sophisticated intelligence apparatus designed to protect the church and its assets. When Christina B. and Jen B. tried to speak out, they did not initially go to the LAPD. They went to the only authority they had ever known, the Church of Scientology. They went to the ethics officers. In Scientology, the ethics department is the internal justice system. It is designed to maintain order and ensure that members are adhering to the teachings of L. Ron Hubbard. But when it comes to crimes committed by high-ranking members against lower-ranking ones, ethics becomes a mechanism of suppression. When the victims reported the rapes, they were met with a wall of gaslighting that is difficult for an outsider to comprehend. They were not treated as victims. They were treated as criminals. In Scientology doctrine, there is a concept called pulling it in. It is a victim-blaming ideology which states that if something bad happens to you, it is because you committed a transgression in this life or a past life that invited the trauma. The ethics officers told these bleeding, traumatized women that they had pulled in the rape. They asked them what they had done to provoke Masterson. They asked them to look inward for their own crimes. But the psychological torture went further. The church has a policy regarding suppressive acts. One of the highest crimes a Scientologist can commit is reporting another Scientologist to civil authorities in a way that damages the reputation of the church. The victims were explicitly told that if they went to the LAPD, they would be declared suppressive persons, SPS. To a Scientologist, being declared an SP is a spiritual death sentence. It triggers the policy of disconnection. If you are declared an SP, every member of the church, your parents, your children, your siblings, your friends, your business partners, must immediately and permanently cut all contact with you. If they speak to you, they too will be declared SPs. Masterson's victims were faced with an impossible choice: stay silent and let the rapist go free, or speak up and lose their entire families and their eternal souls. So they chose silence. Gen B was made to write a success story, a coerced statement thanking the church for helping her understand the incident. Christina B. was put through grueling auditing sessions to clear the trauma, which was effectively a brainwashing technique to rewrite her memory of the assault. Meanwhile, Danny Masterson continued to thrive. He went to work every day on the set of that '70s show. He laughed with Ashton Kutcher. He joked with Wilmer Valderrama. He was the king of the lot. He knew what he had done, and he knew that the multi-million-dollar organization behind him had buried the evidence in a vault of ethics files that no police officer would ever see. Masterson did not operate in a vacuum. He was operating within a Hollywood ecosystem that fetishized the bad boy. The cast and crew of that '70s show looked up to him. He was the alpha male. During these years, Masterson's influence over the cast was total. He introduced them to the church. He brought Laura Prepon into the fold, and she became a devout Scientologist. He worked on recruiting others. He created a social bubble where he was the sun and everyone else was a planet orbiting his gravity. Did the other cast members know? This is the question that haunts the legacy of the show. It is unlikely they knew the graphic details of the guns and the choking, but they knew Masterson's attitude toward women. They knew his arrogance. They knew he viewed himself as a god among men. And yet, they fed his ego. They laughed at his jokes. They celebrated his conquests. Ashton Kutcher in particular idolized Masterson. Danny was the older brother Ashton never had. He modeled his career, his swagger, and his social life after Danny. This hero worship would eventually lead Kutcher down a path of moral bankruptcy that would destroy his own reputation decades later. But in the early 2000s, it just meant that Danny had a dedicated wingman who would never question his behavior. The set of that '70s show became a fortress. Inside, they were a family. Outside, the victims described a campaign of terror. They testified about being hunted by private investigators, reporting that their pets were poisoned and their cars run off the road, a systematic attempt to chip away their sanity piece by piece. But while Masterson was the predator thriving in the darkness, shielded by a sophisticated network of silence, Another tragedy was unfolding on the very same set. While Hollywood moved mountains to protect a powerful man, they did nothing to save a struggling woman. Lisa Robin Kelly, the brilliant, biting, beautiful Lori Foreman, was beginning to crack. Her destruction would become the second and perhaps most heartbreaking pillar of the That 70s show curse. Lori Foreman is born evil. You know that. Eric Foreman. On the surface, Lori Foreman was the character everyone loved to hate. She was the manipulative, promiscuous, mean-spirited older sister who existed to torment Eric and seduce his friends. She was the thorn in her brother's side, the apple of her father's eye, and the dream girl of every teenage boy watching at home. But beneath the surface of the script, Lisa Robin Kelly, the actress who breathed life into Lori, was something far more fragile. She was a comedic genius with a timing that you cannot teach, a woman who could steal a scene from Topher Grace or Ashton Kutcher with a single, perfectly timed eye roll or a devastatingly dry insult. For the first 3 seasons of That 70s show, she was a breakout star, a vital organ in the show's anatomy. The chemistry she shared with the cast was electric, her presence undeniable. She was beautiful, she was talented, and she was standing at the summit of the television world. But while Danny Masterson was using his fame to shield his predatory crimes behind the walls of a Scientology fortress, Lisa Robin Kelly was being slowly crushed by the weight of hers in the unforgiving glare of the public eye. If Masterson represents the impunity of the Hollywood predator, the man who can do no wrong, Lisa Robin Kelly represents the disposability of the Hollywood victim, the woman who can do no right. Her story is not a crime thriller like Masterson's. It is a tragedy of neglect, a heartbreaking saga of a woman who screamed for help in the only way she knew how, by falling apart, and was met not with compassion, but with flashbulbs, mockery, and eventual erasure. The first cracks in the facade appeared during the height of the show's popularity in Season 3. Fans began to notice that Lori Foreman, a character integral to the show's dynamic, started to appear less and less. Her storylines became fragmented, her screen time reduced to fleeting cameos. The writers struggled to explain her absences, offering vague excuses about beauty school or visiting relatives. Behind the scenes, however, the reality was far grimmer. Lisa Robin Kelly was disintegrating. The pressure of sudden global fame is a crucible that few can withstand without a robust support system, and Lisa was navigating these waters without a life vest. While the public saw a glamorous star, private reports and later interviews revealed a woman wrestling with profound personal trauma. During the production of the show, Lisa suffered a miscarriage, a devastating loss that she was forced to endure while maintaining the facade of a carefree, promiscuous sitcom character. The cognitive dissonance was shattering. To grieve in private while playing a character who was defined by her lack of emotional depth was a torture that drove her toward the only numbing agent available: alcohol. Liquor became her coping mechanism, a way to dim the bright lights of the soundstage and silence the grief echoing in her mind. But on a sitcom set, where comedic timing is a matter of milliseconds and production schedules are rigid, addiction is not treated as an illness. It is treated as a liability. Lisa began missing rehearsals. She arrived on set hungover, her eyes betraying the sleepless nights and the chemical fog. In a brutal display of the industry's cold, transactional nature, the show did not pause to help her. There was no intervention, no hiatus for rehabilitation, no rewriting of the season to accommodate her recovery. They simply erased her. By the time Season 6 arrived, the unthinkable happened. After sporadic appearances and failed attempts to reintegrate her, The character of Lori Foreman was recast. The face was different. In one of the most jarring casting changes in sitcom history, Lisa Robin Kelly was fired and replaced by actress Christina Moore. The switch was handled with a callousness that borders on insulting. The characters made a meta joke about Lori's new look, and the audience was expected to move on. It was Hollywood sending a clear, terrifying message. You are interchangeable. We own the character, not the human being inside it. If you break, we will replace you like a burnt-out light bulb. To the audience, it was a confusing casting choice. To Lisa, it was the final nail in her professional coffin. She had been erased from her own legacy, her contribution to the show's success scrubbed away as if she had never existed. Stripped of her career, her identity, and her support system, Lisa's spiral accelerated into a freefall. But unlike Danny Masterson, whose crimes were hidden by the sophisticated intelligence network of a billion-dollar church, Lisa's downfall was broadcast in high definition for the world's entertainment. Between 2010 and 2013, Lisa Robin Kelly became a staple of the tabloid shame cycle, a dark period in media history where the suffering of celebrities was monetized for clicks. She was arrested multiple times for DUI, for domestic disturbances, for assault. Each arrest brought a new mugshot, and each mugshot was more shocking than the last. The media did not look at these photos and see a woman in crisis. They saw content. The vibrant, glowing beauty of Lori Foreman was gone. In her place was a woman who looked decades older than her 40 years. Her eyes were hollow, hauntingly empty. Her skin was gaunt, her hair a chaotic mess. The internet, in its infinite cruelty, turned these images into memes. Look what happened to the hot sister from that 70s show. Meth, not even once. Side-by-side comparisons of her season 1 promo photos and her 2012 booking photos circulated on social media, accompanied by cruel jokes and heartless commentary. Nobody asked why. Nobody asked about the miscarriage. Nobody asked about the depression. Nobody asked about the industry that had chewed her up, exploited her talent, and then spit her out the moment she became inconvenient. They just laughed. They laughed at her pain the same way they had laughed at her jokes on the show, unable or unwilling to distinguish the character from the person. In a rare and heartbreaking moment of clarity, Lisa appeared on Good Morning America in 2012. She looked frail, her voice trembling, but her eyes held a spark of the fire that had once made her a star. "I am not dead," she told the interviewer, staring into the camera as if trying to reach the friends who had abandoned her. "I have a disease. I am an alcoholic. I am fighting for my life." It was a cry for help broadcast to millions. It was a plea for dignity. She was trying to reclaim her narrative, to remind the world that she was still there, still fighting, still human. But the help came too late. The curse of that 70s show does not allow for redemption arcs. On August 15th, 2013, Lisa Robin Kelly checked herself into PAC's rehab house in Altadena, California. It was supposed to be a new beginning. She was trying to get clean. She wanted to act again. She wanted to prove the tabloids wrong. This should have been her redemption arc. She wanted to get sober, write a memoir, and make a return to Netflix. But less than 48 hours after checking in, Lisa Robin Kelly went to sleep and never woke up. She was found dead in her room. The coroner's report cited multiple drug intoxication and accidental overdose. She had a lethal cocktail of drugs in her system, likely taken to manage the agonizing symptoms of withdrawal. She was 43 years old. The woman who had brought so much laughter to the world died alone in a strange bed, fighting a battle she had been waging in solitude for a decade. The news of her death was a blip in the news cycle. It trended on Twitter for a few hours. The cast members released brief PR-sanctioned statements expressing their sadness. Danny Masterson, from the comfort of his freedom and his protected status, tweeted, "She was a comedic genius." The irony was sickening. The man who was actively hiding a history of violent rape, the man who was protected by a cult that silences victims, was publicly mourning the woman who had died from a disease of despair, a disease exacerbated by the silence of her peers. Lisa Robin Kelly's death is the emotional crater of the show. When you watch the reruns now, her scenes are almost impossible to stomach. You see a woman who was brilliant, vibrant, and alive, and you know that she is racing toward a lonely death in a rehab facility. She was the bad girl on the show, but in reality she was the fragile one. She was the one who couldn't fake it. She was the one who couldn't hide behind a mask of cool detachment like Hyde, or a mask of lovable stupidity like Kelso. She was raw, and the industry punished her for it. While she lay in the morgue, the rest of the cast was thriving. Ashton Kutcher was becoming a tech mogul, investing in startups and gracing the covers of business magazines. Mila Kunis was a movie star, the darling of romantic comedies and serious dramas alike. They were the golden couple of Hollywood, the prom king and queen who had made it out of the basement and into the penthouse. They seemed perfect. They seemed untouchable. They were the moral center of the group, the ones who had kept their noses clean, the ones who had played the game correctly. But the reality was far more cynical, because while Lisa was being shamed for her addiction and Danny was hiding his violence, Ashton and Mila were quietly building a wall of protection around their friend. They knew who Danny Masterson was. They knew about the allegations. The whispers in Hollywood are loud, and the circle of that 70s show was tight. And yet, they stayed silent. They watched Lisa die in the public square, offering nothing but platitudes while they privately supported the man who was destroying lives in the shadows. But silence is not just the absence of noise. Sometimes silence is complicity. And when the time came to choose between justice for rape victims and loyalty to their brother, the golden couple made a choice that would shatter their image forever. The final chapter of The Curse isn't about drugs or violence. It is about the most corrosive element of all, hypocrisy. Ashton and Mila were the prom king and queen of the show. They were the ones who made it out. That was the prevailing narrative for nearly 2 decades. Michael Kelso and Jackie Burkhart, the dumb jock and the spoiled princess, were the beating heart of that 70s show. Their on-again, off-again romance was shallow, funny, and surprisingly sweet. But in real life, Ashton Kutcher and Mila Kunis were supposed to be even better. They were the ultimate Hollywood fairy tale, the proof that true love could survive the toxic ecosystem of Los Angeles. 2 young actors who met on set, drifted apart, became massive individual stars, and then found their way back to each other years later to build a family. They were charming. They were philanthropic. They were the good ones. But the curse of that 70s show does not allow for moral purity. It stains everything it touches, and it waits until you are at your highest point to pull the rug out from under you. While Danny Masterson was a predator and Lisa Robin Kelly was a victim, Ashton and Mila became something else entirely, the hypocrites. Their downfall didn't involve handcuffs or an overdose. It involved a pen, a piece of paper, and a breathtaking amount of arrogance. For years, rumors swirled about Danny Masterson. The allegations were an open secret in Hollywood circles. Yet, Ashton and Mila remained steadfastly by his side. They appeared on his Netflix show The Ranch, effectively giving him a second career after that 70s show. They posted photos of family dinners, They publicly celebrated their friendship with the man accused of violently raping multiple women. Even as the hashtag #MeToo movement toppled giants like Harvey Weinstein, the golden couple built a wall of silence around their friend. But silence is one thing, active interference is another. In the lead-up to Masterson's sentencing in 2023, after he had already been convicted by a jury of his peers for raping 2 women, Ashton and Mila wrote character reference letters to the judge. These were not casual notes. These were desperate, calculated pleas for leniency for a convicted serial rapist. In his letter, Ashton Kutcher described Masterson as a role model. He wrote about Masterson's exceptional character and how he trusted him around his own children. He specifically noted Masterson's drug-free lifestyle, a slap in the face to the memory of Lisa Robin Kelly, whose addiction was treated with scorn, while Masterson's sobriety was treated as a virtue that somehow canceled out rape. Mila Kunis, in her letter, called Masterson an outstanding older brother figure. She praised his innate goodness and his dedication to his family. 2 of the most famous people on the planet who have built their brands on being relatable, progressive, and morally upright were asking a judge to go easy on a man who had drugged and raped women because he was nice to them. The hypocrisy was particularly stinging, coming from Ashton Kutcher. Kutcher had spent years building a reputation as an anti-human trafficking crusader. He founded Thorn, an organization dedicated to using technology to stop the sexual exploitation of children. He testified before Congress. He was the face of the fight against sexual abuse. And yet, when the abuser was his best friend, the crusader vanished, replaced by a crony protecting his inner circle. It was a revelation that shattered his credibility instantly. It revealed that for the Hollywood elite, justice is a concept that applies only to strangers, never to friends. When the letters were made public, the internet exploded. The backlash was immediate and ferocious. The good guy image of Ashton Kutcher evaporated overnight. The cool girl charm of Mila Kunis turned sour. They were exposed as enablers. In a desperate attempt at damage control, they released an apology video on Instagram. They sat side by side, looking somber, dressed in plain clothes against a plain gray wall. It looked less like a sincere act of contrition and more like a hostage video. We are aware of the pain that has been caused by the character letters that we wrote on behalf of Danny Masterson, Ashton said, his voice devoid of its usual charm. We support victims, Mila added, looking straight into the camera. But the public wasn't buying it. The comments section was a massacre. You support victims, but you wrote letters for their rapist? You are sorry you got caught, not sorry you did it. The silence would have been better than this lie. The damage was done. The golden couple had fallen. They were not criminals, but they were morally bankrupt. They had chosen loyalty to a predator over integrity, and in doing so, they had shattered the last illusion of innocence surrounding the show. And as if the fall of the golden couple wasn't enough, the curse had one more layer to peel back. We cannot close the file on that 70s show without mentioning Fez. Wilmer Valderrama, the actor who played the lovable foreign exchange student, has largely escaped the criminal scrutiny of Masterson, but his behavior fits perfectly into the disturbing pattern of the show's legacy. Valderrama gained a reputation in the mid-2000s, not for his acting but for dating teenage girls while he was a grown man. He dated Mandy Moore when she was 16. He dated Lindsay Lohan when she was 17. He pursued a relationship with Demi Lovato shortly after her 18th birthday, having met her when she was just 17 and he was 29. Like Masterson, Valderrama operated with a sense of entitlement over young women. While not convicted of crimes, his playbook of targeting stars right on the cusp of adulthood creates a portrait of a caste that viewed women as commodities. The basement wasn't just a set. For the darker elements of the cast, it became a playground for stars who operated with a disturbing sense of entitlement. Today, the basement remains, but the laughter is gone. The couch where they laughed is empty. The freezer where they hid the stash is empty. The Vista Cruiser is gone. What remains is not a legacy of laughter, but a roster of tragedies. A predator serving life behind bars, a bad girl lost to an early grave, and a golden couple whose moral pedestal has crumbled into dust. Even the lovable Fez is now shadowed by the uncomfortable truths of his past day. The curse of that 70s show is complete. The sitcom was a lie. The friendship was a performance. The family was a cult. When you look back at that 70s show now, you don't see a group of groovy teenagers hanging out. You see the sight of a systematic betrayal. You see the wreckage of human lives scattered across 200 episodes of canned laughter. You see a testament to the fact that Hollywood will protect its monsters until the very last second, and it will discard its victims without a second thought. Hello, Wisconsin was the beginning. It was a scream of joy. Goodbye, innocence is the end. It is a scream of silence. The basement door is closed. The lights are out, and this time, no one is laughing. The basement of that 70s show is closed, but Hollywood has countless other basements, locked tight with secrets and silence. Which forgotten tragedy or hidden monster should we expose next? Tell me in the comments below. And if you believe these stories deserve to be brought into the light, please leave a like and subscribe. Help us shine a light where they want to keep it dark. I'll see you in the next investigation.